standing in the driveway of my childhood home, still wearing the black dress I'd put on at 5 in the morning, when I heard my older sister laughing inside. Not a quiet laugh. Not the kind you accidentally let slip when grief makes you desperate for any relief. It was loud and loose, the kind that means someone is genuinely having a good time. 3 hours after we'd lowered my father into the ground. My name is Lily, I'm 31 years old, and I'm a certified public accountant who specializes in estate tax compliance. I'd spent the last 4 days coordinating my father's funeral arrangements, fielding calls from his financial advisor, and sitting across from a probate attorney in a downtown Chicago office while I tried to hold myself together. That morning, before the burial, the attorney had pulled me aside and told me something that changed everything. My father had left behind a private investment portfolio worth just over $2 million, a fully paid off rental property in Evanston, and the family home I was standing in front of right now. He had named me sole beneficiary of all of it. Not my sister. Not my brother-in-law. Me. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was still processing it myself. I put my key in the front door, and that's when I heard my brother-in-law's voice carrying through the hallway like he owned the place. Which, as of that morning, he very much did not. I stopped with my hand on the door handle and listened. "She's not going to fight it," he was saying. "His name is Mitchell, and he has a voice like someone who spent 20 years pretending to be more important than he is. She barely held it together at the cemetery. Did you see her? She looked like she was going to pass out. She's in no shape to manage a property portfolio. She doesn't even own a home." My sister, her name is Vanessa. She's 36. She's always been the one my parents introduced first at parties, spoke next. "I'm not saying she can't handle money. I'm saying she shouldn't have to. She's grieving. We're doing her a favor." Exactly. That was my mother, my own mother. Mitchell has connections in real estate. He knows what to do with rental properties. Lily doesn't know the first thing about being a landlord. I pressed my back against the doorframe and breathed through my nose. I am a licensed CPA who has filed estate returns for clients with portfolios 20 times the size of my father's. I have literally taught continuing education seminars on inherited property taxation. But sure, I didn't know the first thing. "The will isn't even filed with probate yet," Mitchell continued. I could hear the confidence in his voice, that particular brand of certainty that belongs to men who've never been held accountable for anything. "If Lily signs a voluntary transfer of executor authority over to me before it's entered into the court record, we can have the Evanston property listed by the end of the month. I already have a buyer lined up. Cash offer. We split the proceeds 3 ways and everyone moves forward." Vanessa said, "She'll do it. She trusts me." There it was. I stood in that doorway for what felt like a very long time. The wind was cold off the lake. My dress was too thin for October in Chicago, and I was shaking, but not from the temperature. My father was a quiet man. He worked for 30 years as a mechanical engineer, lived in the same house he bought in 1987, drove a 12-year-old Honda, and never once mentioned that he'd been steadily investing his savings into a diversified brokerage account since before I was born. He didn't tell me because I would have insisted on helping him manage it, and he knew me well enough to know I'd have turned it into a project. He wanted it simple. He wanted it to be a gift. It was a gift, and my brother-in-law was already planning the closing costs. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, fixed my expression into something appropriately devastated, and opened the front door. The living room went quiet in this specific way. Rooms go quiet when people have just said something they don't want overheard. My mother was on the couch with a glass of wine, which was unusual enough for a Thursday afternoon that I noticed it immediately. Vanessa was in the armchair closest to the fireplace, legs crossed, hands folded, wearing the expression she uses when she's waiting to manage someone. Mitchell was standing near the window with his phone face down on the sill, which is something he only does when he doesn't want me to see who he's been texting. "There she is," my mother said, standing up and opening her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." I walked into her hug. Over her shoulder, I watched Mitchell pick up his phone and slide it into his jacket pocket. "How are you holding up?" Vanessa asked. She said it the way a doctor asks a patient to rate their pain on a scale of 1 to 10, not because she wanted to know, but because it was the required question before she got to the part she actually cared about. I'm okay, I said. Tired. It's been a long week. Sit down, my mother said. Mitchell opened a bottle of Dad's Bordeaux. He thought it would be a nice way to remember him. Mitchell had opened my father's wine, in my father's house, on the day of my father's funeral, before the will had even been filed. I sat down. I let my hands rest loosely in my lap, slightly trembling, which wasn't entirely an act. Mitchell poured me a glass I didn't ask for and settled into the chair across from me with the body language of a man about to close a deal. Lily, he said, I know this isn't the right time, but there are some things we need to handle sooner rather than later, and I want to take the burden off you while you're going through this. I looked up at him. I kept my face open, soft, tired. He walked me through it carefully, the way someone does when they think they're being subtle. He talked about probate timelines, about how long estates can get tied up in court, about the stress of managing a rental property from across the city when you're already overwhelmed. He mentioned, almost casually, that he had a colleague in residential real estate who was very motivated to move quickly on the Evanston property, and that a fast private sale would save all of us from months of legal delay. I've already drafted something, he said, reaching into the leather portfolio he'd brought and setting a document on the coffee table. It's a limited executor authorization. You're not giving up any rights to the estate. You're just allowing me to act on your behalf during the administrative period so you don't have to deal with the paperwork while you're grieving. Vanessa reached over and touched my arm. It's what Dad would have wanted. You know he hated the idea of you being stressed. My mother nodded. Mitchell has done this before. He knows how to handle it. I picked up the document and looked at it. It was not a limited executor authorization. It was a full assignment of executor authority, which, under Illinois probate law, is an entirely different instrument. Signing it would have removed my legal standing to manage the estate entirely and transferred all decision-making power to Mitchell. He could liquidate every asset, including the rental property and the investment portfolio, and I would have had no legal recourse to stop him. The language was buried on page 3, in a paragraph that most people would have assumed was standard boilerplate. Most people. I took a slow breath. My hand was steady. I've reviewed thousands of estate documents, and I've learned that the most important thing you can do when you find something fraudulent is not let anyone know you found it. I don't totally understand all of this, I said, looking up at Mitchell with the expression of someone who definitely did not have a master's degree in taxation. But you're saying this protects me? Completely, he said. This is standard stuff, Lily. My attorney drew it up. It just gives me the authority to move things along so you can focus on taking care of yourself. His attorney, not the estate's attorney. His. Okay, I said quietly. I picked up the pen he'd placed on the table. Vanessa watched me with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting for this moment. My mother looked relieved, which told me everything I needed to know about how long they'd been planning this. I signed. But I didn't sign my name. This is something I've never told anyone outside of a professional context, but when I started my practice 8 years ago, my mentor, a sharp, somewhat paranoid woman who'd been defrauded by a business partner in her 30s, insisted I establish what she called a signature flag, a specific version of my signature, documented and notarized, that I would use only if I was signing something under duress or deception. The flagged version would be legally unenforceable and would simultaneously alert my practice's compliance system to pull the associated document for review. I used it on every page Mitchell put in front of me. I handed the document back. Mitchell tucked it into his portfolio with the satisfied efficiency of a man who has just completed a transaction. Vanessa exhaled. My mother refilled her wine. We'll get everything sorted out, Mitchell said. You won't have to worry about a thing. Thank you, I said. My voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know what I'd do without you guys. After they left, after I watched Mitchell load his leather portfolio into the back of his car and my mother walk my sister to her passenger door without once glancing back at the house, I locked every deadbolt, sat down at my father's kitchen table, and called my attorney. Her name is Josephine. She's been practicing probate and estate law in Cook County for 22 years, and she picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. The document, the flagged signature, the conversation I'd overheard, the buyer Mitchell had supposedly lined up. How long has the will been with the probate court? She asked. The filing should have gone through yesterday, I said. The estate attorney submitted it. Then it's already a matter of public record, Josephine said. What Mitchell drafted isn't worth the paper it's printed on, even without the flagged signature, because executor authority over a filed will cannot be privately transferred. He either doesn't know that, which means he's an idiot, or he knows it and was counting on you not knowing it, which means he's something worse. I think it's the second one, I said. Of course it is. I could hear her already typing. I'm going to file an immediate protective order on the estate assets tomorrow morning. That freezes everything, the brokerage account, the rental property, and the family home, so nothing can be transferred, listed, or liquidated without court approval. It also formally flags the estate as contested, which means any third party Mitchell approaches about buying that Evanston property will have to do a title search and they'll see the freeze immediately. What about the buyer he mentioned? If a real transaction exists, it dies the moment the freeze hits the record. Cash buyers don't touch contested estates. She paused. Did he say anything about the investment portfolio? Not specifically. I think he assumed the rental property and the house were the main assets. He doesn't know about the portfolio. No? Good. Let's keep it that way for now. I sat in my father's kitchen for a long time after I hung up. His coffee mug was still on the counter, half rinsed, the way he always left it. He'd had a particular habit of rinsing his mug halfway and then forgetting about it, and for 31 years it had driven me slightly crazy, and now I couldn't look at it without feeling like the floor was tilting. I thought about the fact that my sister had sat in that armchair and said, I don't know what I'd do without you guys, without any detectable hesitation. She'd practiced it. Or it had just come naturally, which might have been worse. I went to bed at 9 o'clock and slept for 11 hours. The protective order went through the following morning. Josephine called me at 8:15 to confirm. By 10, my phone was ringing. I let it go to voicemail. Mitchell left a message that started calm and ended clipped, something about a timeline and the courtesy call and how he thought we were all on the same page. I listened to it twice, then forwarded it to Josephine. At 11, Vanessa called. I let that one go to voicemail too. Her message was different. She sounded genuinely confused, which was interesting because either she hadn't known about the protective order or she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for. She said she just wanted to check in, that she was worried about me, that Mitchell had mentioned some kind of complication with the estate paperwork, and could I please call her back? I didn't. I spent the next 2 days pulling Mitchell's professional history. I'm a CPA. I know how to find things in public financial records that most people don't know exist. State business filings, UCC liens, judgment records, tax court dockets. What I found wasn't surprising exactly, but the scope of it was. Mitchell's real estate consulting business had a lien filed against it by a private creditor 18 months earlier. He'd had a judgment entered against him in Cook County Civil Court for an unpaid contractor dispute. His business checking account had been flagged by his bank for unusual activity. I found this in an old lawsuit filing where the bank's internal records had been submitted as evidence. He wasn't just in debt. He was in the specific kind of debt that makes people desperate enough to try to steal from their grieving sister-in-law at a funeral reception. I forwarded everything to Josephine and asked her to hold it. I wasn't done yet. On the third day after the funeral, they showed up at my father's house. I saw them on the Ring camera before they knocked. Mitchell and Vanessa, standing on the front porch, Mitchell's jaw doing the tight thing it does when he's trying to appear composed. I let them knock twice before I opened the door. Hey, Vanessa said. She was doing the soft voice. The concerned older sister voice. We've been trying to reach you. I know, I said. I needed some space. Can we come in? I stepped back and let them in. We sat in the living room, same chairs as before, and I watched Mitchell take stock of the room the way he had at the reception, cataloging, assessing, running numbers in his head about square footage and market value. It was a reflex for him. He couldn't help it. There's been a complication, he said. With the estate. I waited. The court has frozen the assets. I don't know who filed the order, probably the estate attorney being overly cautious, but it means the sale of the Evanston property is on hold until it gets resolved. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, doing the sincere look. I need you to call the estate attorney and authorize them to release the freeze. It's a simple request. It'll take 10 minutes. Why would I do that? I asked. He blinked. So we can move forward, like we discussed. I'm not sure we discussed anything that would require me to release a protective order on my father's assets, I said in the exact tone I use when a client is trying to get me to sign off on something I know is wrong. Vanessa said, Lily. The document I signed the other day, I said, looking at Mitchell, was a full assignment of executor authority, not a limited authorization. I'm sure you know that. The room got very still. Mitchell said, That's not. Page 3, paragraph 4, I said. The language transferred all decision-making power over the estate assets to you with no limitation on scope and no expiration. It would have given you the legal authority to liquidate everything, including the investment portfolio. Vanessa turned to look at her husband. It was the first genuinely unrehearsed thing she'd done since I'd walked into the living room. What investment portfolio? She said. Mitchell didn't answer. Dad had a brokerage account, I said. He'd been building it for about 20 years. It's worth a little over $2 million. I watched Vanessa's face go through several different expressions in rapid succession. He left everything to me. The rental property, the family home, and the portfolio. I'm the sole beneficiary. Vanessa stood up. That's not possible. He wouldn't have. He would have, I said. He did. And the will has been on file with the probate court since the day after he died, which means the document Mitchell asked me to sign was not only fraudulent in its terms, it was legally meaningless because executor authority over a filed will can't be privately transferred in Illinois. Mitchell said, very quietly, You knew? I'm a CPA who specializes in estate taxation, I said. Yes. What happened next is something I've thought about a lot since. Vanessa didn't immediately defend her husband. She sat back down, slowly, and looked at the floor and said nothing. Mitchell started talking about the debt, about the creditor, about the contractor dispute, the words coming out in a rush, like a pressure valve releasing, each sentence a little more desperate than the last. He talked about how close they'd come to losing their condo. He talked about a refinancing that had fallen through. He talked about how he'd thought if they could just get the Evanston property sold quickly, they could get ahead of it. He was confessing, in my father's living room, to me. I let him talk. When he stopped, I said, I'm going to ask you both to leave now. Lily, Vanessa started. I'm not angry, I said, which was mostly true. The anger had burned off somewhere around day 2 of the financial record search, replaced by something colder and more useful. But I'm not releasing the protective order. I'm not authorizing any transfer of assets, and I'm not having this conversation again. Josephine will be in touch with you about next steps. Who's Josephine? Mitchell asked. My attorney. They left. I didn't walk them to the door. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't expected. The protective order held. The probate process moved forward without complications. Mitchell made one more attempt to reach me through a mutual acquaintance, which I documented and forwarded to Josephine, who sent a letter that apparently put an end to it. What I hadn't anticipated was my mother. She called me 3 weeks after the funeral on a Sunday morning, and for the first 10 minutes, she did the gentle version, asking how I was sleeping, whether I was eating, had I gone back to work yet. Then she shifted. Your sister is going through a very difficult time, she said. I know. Mitchell's business is struggling. They're worried about their home. I know that too. Your father would have wanted you to help your family. I was quiet for a moment. Dad specifically chose not to include Vanessa in the estate, I said. That was a deliberate decision he made over a period of years. I'm not going to override it. You're being rigid. I'm executing his wishes. He didn't know they'd be in financial trouble when he... Mom! My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. I softened it. Mitchell tried to defraud me, using a document he had drafted by his own attorney. on the day of Dad's funeral. I need you to understand what I'm saying. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was planned. Silence. Vanessa knew, I said. I heard her. More silence. I love you, I said. I love Vanessa, but I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, and I'm not going to make financial decisions based on guilt. My mother said she needed to think. She hung up. She called back 4 days later and apologized. Not for what they'd done. I don't think she could quite get there. Not yet. But for the wine. For opening my father's Bordeaux without asking. For not looking back at the house when she left. It was a partial accounting, but it was honest, and for now it was enough. My sister took longer. I won't describe the full arc of that, because it's still unfolding, and some of it is private in the way that family things stay private even after everything else has been laid bare. What I'll say is that Vanessa called me 6 weeks after the funeral and cried for 20 minutes, real crying, not the managed kind, and at one point she said I knew it was wrong, and I told myself it wasn't because I needed it not to be. And that sentence told me more about what happened than anything Mitchell had ever tried to explain. Mitchell is facing a civil fraud claim that Josephine filed on my behalf in Cook County. I'm not looking for money. The fraudulent document was never legally valid, so there's no actual financial damage to recover. What the claim does is create a public record of what he attempted, which matters to me in a way that's hard to articulate. It just matters. The Evanston rental property is still in my name. I have a property management company handling the tenants. Every month, the rent covers the maintenance and throws off a small surplus that I've been depositing into a separate account I haven't decided what to do with yet. The investment portfolio is being managed by a fee-only financial advisor I found through my professional network. I didn't touch the principal. I'm not sure I'll ever touch the principal. It feels like something my father built slowly and quietly over decades, and I'm not in a rush to do anything with it that he wouldn't recognize. I still live in my apartment in Logan Square. I still make my own coffee every morning, and I still work too many hours, and I still sometimes open a new client file and spend 20 minutes staring at it before I can begin. Grief is not linear, and it doesn't resolve on a schedule, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I know what my father did for me. He spent 30 years quietly building something, and then he left it in my hands because he trusted me to hold it. Not because I was the oldest, not because I'd made the most impressive life on the outside, because he knew who I was when nobody was watching. That's the thing about quiet people. They're paying attention the whole time. If you've ever had to protect something that was yours from people who should have been safe, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe. There are more of them, and I think you need to hear them. I keep coming back to the moment I signed that document. My hand was completely steady. Mitchell was watching the pen like it was the answer to every problem he'd created for himself, and my sister was sitting across the room, doing the careful breathing of someone trying not to look too relieved too soon, and I just signed, slowly, deliberately, using the one version of my signature that meant the opposite of consent. I've thought about why my father never told me about the money. For a while it bothered me, the way secrets between people who love each other always sting a little even when the intention behind them was good. But I think I understand it now. He knew that if I'd known, I would have spent years managing it, optimizing it, worrying about it. He wanted me to have it clean. He wanted it to arrive in my life as a gift, not a responsibility I'd been quietly carrying on his behalf. That's the thing about people who do right by others without needing anyone to notice. The weight of it doesn't show on the outside. My father drove a 12-year-old Honda and left a coffee mug half-rinsed on the counter every single morning for 30 years. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was just trying to take care of me in the way that felt most true to who he was. And when the moment came where that care could have been taken from me by the people sitting in his living room drinking his wine, the thing that protected me was not luck. It was the fact that I had spent 8 years building the kind of knowledge and discipline that lets you see a fraudulent document for what it is on page 3, paragraph 4, without letting your face change. I don't think of what happened as a story about revenge. Mitchell and Vanessa didn't lose anything I took from them. They lost things they were never entitled to, and they lost them because they underestimated what I knew and overestimated what grief does to a person's ability to think clearly. That's a consequence, not a punishment. The difference matters to me. What I've sat with the longest is the part about my mother. She called to tell me my sister was struggling, and what I heard underneath that was her own struggle. The discomfort of loving people who have done something wrong, the desire to smooth it over rather than name it. I understand that impulse. I felt it myself. But understanding it isn't the same as letting it rewrite what happened, and I think one of the harder things I've learned is that you can love someone and still refuse to protect them from the truth of their own choices. My father built something quietly over 20 years because he believed in doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. I think about that a lot, not as a lesson I'm delivering to anyone else, but as something I'm still learning for myself, what it looks like to act with integrity when the only witness is you, what it costs, and what it's worth. He knew. And in the end, that quiet knowledge was the most valuable thing he left me. The portfolio is still sitting mostly untouched. I'm in no rush.